over the past few years, we've all become armchair epidemiologists, right? We've learned all about things like viral load and contact tracing. But you have to wonder, was COVID-19 just some kind of once-in-a-century fluke? Well, the unsettling truth is, it was really just the latest chapter in a very, very old story. So today, we're going to dive into the bigger picture of emerging diseases, what they are, why they seem to be on the rise, and what on earth we can do to prepare for the next one.
It's almost hard to imagine now, but picture this. Back in the 1960s, a lot of people in the public health world genuinely believed the war against infectious diseases was basically won. I mean, with powerful new antibiotics and incredible vaccines, it really felt like humanity had finally tamed the microbial world. The future looked bright, disease-free.
So, what happened? I mean, really, if we'd supposedly won the war, how did we get here? The truth is, that war never really ended. We got a little too comfortable.
To really get a handle on our present situation, we have to rewind the clock a bit. See, pandemics aren't new, not at all. They're actually a reoccurring theme in human history. They've toppled empires, they've decided the outcome of wars, and they have fundamentally reshaped our world over and over again.
Let's just think about the sheer scale of some of these for a second. The Black Death, it wiped out up to 60% of Europe's entire population. Smallpox in the 18th century alone was killing 400,000 Europeans every year. And the 1918 Spanish flu? Wow, it killed more people in a single year than all 4 bloody years of World War I combined. This isn't just trivia, you guys. These are incredibly stark reminders of just how vulnerable we've always been.
Okay, so to really understand the threat we're facing today, we need to get some of the lingo down. Epidemiologists, the real experts, they use 2 key terms, EIDs and REIDs. And knowing the difference between them is absolutely crucial to understanding the challenges that lie ahead.
First up, we've got an emerging infectious disease, or an EID. Think of this as a brand new threat. It's a disease that we really haven't seen in humans before, like HIV was back in the 80s, or maybe one that was stuck in a small, isolated area and has now broken out. COVID-19 is, of course, the perfect and most recent example of an EID.
And then you have a re-emerging infectious disease, or a REID. This is basically an old foe making a comeback. It's a disease we thought we had under control, or even beaten, that's now roaring back as a major threat. A classic example is measles, which can pop back up in places where vaccination rates have dropped.
So, when you boil it all down, the key difference is really just new versus old. EIDs are the new problems, often making that scary jump from animals to humans for the very first time. RIDs are the old enemies that have found new ways to attack us. The bottom line is, both are incredibly serious threats to our health.
It's not just your imagination. These outbreaks really are happening more often. But why? Well, the answer has a lot less to do with the viruses and bacteria themselves, and a whole lot more to do with us.
Okay, so here's a really critical piece of the puzzle. The vast majority of these new diseases are what scientists call zoonotic. All that means is that they jump from animals to people. And that jump can happen in all sorts of ways, through direct contact, an insect bite, or even contaminated food and water.
This chart really helps break it down for us. You can see that a whopping 60% come from wildlife. But look, it's not just wild animals out in the jungle. A pretty significant 15% comes from our domesticated animals, often because of things like intensive farming. And that other 25%? That's non-zoonotic stuff, like when our overuse of antibiotics creates these drug-resistant superbugs.
The thing is, there's no single cause here. It's more like this huge tangled web of triggers that, frankly, we've created ourselves. Globalization means a virus can hop on a plane and be on the other side of the world in a matter of hours. Climate change is pushing animals and the diseases they carry into totally new areas. Urbanization means we're living closer and closer to wildlife. And of course, any gaps in our public health systems, like low vaccination rates, are like an open invitation for old diseases to come storming back.
So how do we fight back against all this? Well, that's where the epidemiologists, the real-life disease detectives, come in. They have a systematic approach and a constantly evolving set of tools they use to track, to understand, and hopefully to stop these outbreaks in their tracks.
So this whole process, it's not just chaos, right? There's a real method to the madness. This slide breaks down the 4 key steps. It all starts with surveillance. Basically, being on the lookout for early warning signs, like a weird cluster of flu cases in July. Once a signal pops up, the investigation kicks off.
That's the boots-on-the-ground work of identifying cases and tracing contacts. Then, all that data gets analyzed to map the outbreak and try to predict its next move. And finally, that analysis shapes a targeted response designed to contain the disease. And get this, the toolkit these detectives are using is getting seriously high-tech. We're now using AI to scan news reports and flight data to try and predict where the next outbreak might happen. We can literally test a city's wastewater to find a virus before people even start feeling sick. We've got these rapid tests that can check for a whole bunch of diseases from a single swab. And as we all saw with COVID-19, we can now develop and manufacture life-saving vaccines at a speed that was unimaginable just a decade ago. These tools are fundamentally changing how we evaluate and respond to these threats.
You know, the COVID-19 pandemic was a brutal global stress test for every public health system on the planet. It was absolutely devastating, but it also taught us a tremendous amount. The thing is, we have to actually learn from these lessons, or we're just doomed to repeat the same mistakes all over again.
Just take a second and let this number sink in. Over 5 million recorded deaths by the end of 2021 alone, and we all know the true number is probably much, much higher. This isn't just a statistic. It's the heartbreaking human cost of being unprepared.
So what are the big takeaways? What do we actually learn? Well, it really boils down to 5 key global lessons. First, our local hospitals, national agencies, and global groups, they have to be in constant communication. Second, we have to get way better at identifying our most vulnerable populations before a crisis hits. Third, we need systems to see in real time if our public health measures are actually working. Fourth, digital tools like telemedicine, well, they're not just a nice-to-have anymore. They're absolutely essential. And fifth, we have to keep sharing what works and what doesn't so everyone can improve their strategies.
So, where do we go from here? The question really isn't if there will be another pandemic, but when. And our goal now has to be building a more resilient, more prepared world, one that's a whole lot smarter about how we handle these threats. And a really big idea that's shaping that future is something called One Health. This is a major shift in how we think. It's all about recognizing that you can't separate human health from the health of animals and the health of our environment. It's all one interconnected system. You can't have healthy people living on a sick planet with sick animals. It just doesn't work.
Now, this path forward, it's not going to be easy. We face some huge challenges. The pathogens themselves are evolving at lightning speed. Our drugs are becoming less effective. There are still major gaps in our global defenses. And maybe the biggest hurdle of all, making sure we have the political commitment and the funding to stay prepared even when there isn't an active crisis staring us in the face.
And that really brings us to the fundamental question, doesn't it? These microbes, they aren't evil. They're just a part of our world. They were here long before us, and they'll be here long after we're gone. So the challenge for us is to find a smarter, more harmonious way to coexist, a way that protects our health, our communities, and our future. The question is, are we truly ready to make the changes needed to do that?